Dopamine is often misunderstood as a chemical that simply makes people feel pleasure, but its primary role is far more complex and essential for behavior. It is the central signal for motivation, drive, and goal-directed action. Rather than being a reward in itself, dopamine functions as a signal that the brain uses to evaluate the potential value of effort and guide behavior toward outcomes that matter. When dopamine is active, the brain is more willing to initiate action, sustain focus, and overcome obstacles in pursuit of a goal. Without sufficient dopamine signaling, even tasks that are important or rewarding can feel burdensome, and motivation diminishes. The molecule operates across several interconnected brain regions, particularly those responsible for decision-making, learning, and reward prediction. When a person identifies a goal or anticipates a potential reward, specialized dopamine neurons activate, sending signals that amplify attention and energy toward the task at hand. This activity prepares the brain and body to act. Heart rate may increase slightly, alertness rises, and cognitive resources are allocated to problem solving and planning. Essentially, dopamine acts as a signal that informs the brain, this is worth pursuing. Invest energy now. One of the defining features of dopamine is that it responds strongly to anticipation rather than just the outcome itself. The brain releases dopamine when it predicts that a rewarding or meaningful event is likely to occur. This is why progress, incremental steps, or the promise of achievement can feel more motivating than the actual reward. In this way, dopamine encourages persistence, allowing individuals to continue exerting effort even when immediate gratification is absent. It creates the drive to move forward, to take action repeatedly, and to maintain focus over time. Dopamine's role in motivation is also closely tied to learning. Every time an action leads to progress or a positive outcome, dopamine signals reinforce the neural connections responsible for that behavior. This reinforcement is critical for habit formation. The brain begins to associate specific actions or routines with positive outcomes, making it more likely that those actions will be repeated in the future. Over time, this process allows dopamine to shape behavior patterns that support sustained effort and goal achievement. It is also important to recognize that dopamine is not evenly distributed in the brain. Its effects depend on the context of activation and the networks it engages. For example, dopamine signaling in areas linked to attention improves focus, helping the brain filter out distractions and concentrate on high-priority tasks. In circuits associated with reward learning, dopamine tracks progress toward meaningful goals, signaling when effort is producing results. Together, these pathways make it possible to sustain engagement with challenging tasks, even in the absence of immediate pleasure or external reward. However, dopamine is not static. It fluctuates throughout the day based on sleep, activity, nutrition, and prior stimulation. Low or imbalanced dopamine signaling can lead to reduced motivation, mental fatigue, and difficulty sustaining attention, even when the task is important or enjoyable. Conversely, appropriately timed dopamine activity amplifies the drive to act, the focus to concentrate, and the satisfaction derived from progress. In this way, dopamine is more accurately described as a molecule of pursuit rather than reward. It signals importance, energizes action, and maintains engagement, guiding behavior in a way that allows individuals to achieve goals, learn from effort, and experience the sense of accomplishment that comes from meaningful progress. By understanding dopamine's true function, it becomes clear that motivation is less about seeking pleasure and more about directing energy, attention, and effort toward outcomes that matter. Dopamine's influence on motivation is tightly linked to the anticipation of reward rather than the reward itself. The brain is constantly predicting what is likely to happen next, and dopamine is a key signal that informs the nervous system about the potential value of future outcomes. When a person expects that an action will lead to a meaningful or rewarding result, dopamine levels rise, preparing the brain and body to engage with that activity. This anticipation drives energy, attention, and persistence, even before any actual reward has been received. It is this forward-looking aspect of dopamine that makes it such a powerful regulator of motivation. The anticipation signal is critical because it allows the brain to sustain effort over time. Many goals, whether learning a skill, completing a project, or maintaining a fitness routine, require prolonged effort without immediate payoff. Dopamine provides a continuous internal reinforcement system that keeps the brain invested in these tasks. Each small step toward progress triggers further dopamine release, creating a positive feedback loop where effort itself becomes rewarding. In this way, motivation is less about the end result and more about the process of approaching and achieving incremental milestones. The predictive nature of dopamine also interacts with the brain's learning circuits. Every time the brain anticipates a reward and the action produces a positive outcome, dopamine strengthens the neural connections that link specific behaviors to successful results. This reinforcement allows the brain to learn efficiently from experience. Over time, repeated anticipation and reward help the brain form habits, making goal-directed behavior more automatic and less dependent on conscious effort. The brain becomes more adept at identifying which actions are likely to produce meaningful results and allocating energy accordingly. However, the brain is highly sensitive to the frequency and intensity of rewards in the environment. In modern contexts, people are frequently exposed to fast, easily obtained rewards, such as social media notifications, instant entertainment, and other sources of rapid stimulation. These frequent, high-intensity dopamine spikes can recalibrate the brain's reward system, making slower or more effortful tasks feel less compelling by comparison. When the brain becomes accustomed to rapid, intense dopamine releases, the anticipation of smaller, longer-term rewards produces relatively weaker dopamine signals, which can reduce motivation for activities that require sustained effort. To counteract this effect, it is important to structure experiences and goals in a way that optimizes the brain's anticipation signal. Breaking larger tasks into smaller, achievable steps ensures that progress consistently triggers dopamine release. Even minor successes become meaningful cues that maintain motivation and focus. The brain begins to expect positive outcomes from effort, reinforcing the pursuit of meaningful tasks rather than seeking only immediate, high-intensity rewards. Timing also matters. Dopamine is influenced by the predictability of outcomes. When the brain can reliably associate effort with reward, motivation strengthens. Conversely, when outcomes are inconsistent or uncertain, dopamine signaling can become less efficient, reducing the drive to act. Consistently pairing effort with measurable progress helps the brain interpret each step as valuable, which enhances both focus and persistence. By leveraging the anticipation mechanism of dopamine, it becomes possible to train the nervous system to remain engaged and motivated even in the absence of immediate gratification. The brain begins to recognize that effort itself is inherently valuable and that consistent goal-directed actions will eventually lead to meaningful outcomes. Over time, this approach allows motivation to become self-sustaining, attention to remain stable, and satisfaction to grow from steady progress rather than isolated moments of pleasure. In today's world, the brain's dopamine system is constantly exposed to rapid, high-intensity stimulation from modern sources such as social media, video games, instant messaging, and other forms of immediate entertainment. These sources provide quick bursts of novelty and reward, creating repeated dopamine spikes that can dramatically alter the brain's sensitivity to motivation and effort. While these experiences feel enjoyable in the moment, they can unintentionally recalibrate the brain's reward system, making slower, longer-term, and more meaningful tasks feel less engaging. The more frequently the brain encounters these rapid stimuli, the more it begins to expect constant, immediate reward. As a result, natural sources of motivation for long-term goals can feel comparatively dull or effortful. The mechanism behind this effect lies in the brain's contrast-based evaluation of reward. Dopamine responds not just to pleasure itself, but to changes in expected versus actual outcomes. When a person constantly receives high-intensity rewards, the baseline expectation for reward rises. Ordinary experiences, like studying, completing work projects, or exercising, produce smaller dopamine signals relative to the frequent spikes, which can reduce the sense of motivation and satisfaction derived from these tasks. Over time, this can create a feedback loop where the brain increasingly seeks high-intensity stimulation, neglecting slower, effort-based activities that are essential for long-term achievement. This phenomenon is particularly evident in tasks that require persistence and delayed gratification. Dopamine-driven anticipation is strongest when the brain predicts a meaningful outcome, but frequent exposure to instant rewards reduces sensitivity to the moderate signals associated with gradual progress. As a result, the brain may interpret effortful tasks as less rewarding, even when they are inherently valuable. Motivation declines, focus is harder to maintain, and a sense of fulfillment from steady achievement diminishes. In essence, the brain becomes trained to expect instant gratification, which undermines the natural reward system that supports long-term goal pursuit. To counteract this effect, it is important to intentionally manage dopamine exposure. Reducing reliance on instant sources of reward helps recalibrate the brain's baseline, making slower, effortful activities more compelling again. Limiting time spent on highly stimulating digital platforms and creating structured periods of focused work can help the brain regain sensitivity to moderate dopamine signals. When the brain is not constantly flooded with rapid spikes, even small accomplishments begin to produce meaningful motivation, reinforcing effort and progress. Another critical strategy is learning to derive dopamine from the process of effort itself. The brain can be trained to recognize that incremental steps toward a goal are inherently rewarding, even if the final outcome is not immediately apparent. By focusing on small achievements, measuring progress, and celebrating effort, dopamine signaling can be aligned with long-term goals rather than instant gratification. This approach helps maintain attention, persistence, and engagement with meaningful tasks. Additionally, physical activity, sleep, and proper nutrition play important roles in restoring dopamine balance. Exercise increases the release of dopamine and improves receptor sensitivity, helping the brain respond more effectively to natural rewards. Adequate sleep recalibrates the dopamine system, ensuring that anticipation signals function optimally the following day. Balanced nutrition, particularly foods that support dopamine synthesis, contributes to stable motivation and focus. Finally, intentionally delaying rewards after completing effortful tasks strengthens the brain's association between work and meaningful outcomes. By resisting the urge for immediate gratification, the brain learns that sustained effort leads to real progress, reinforcing motivation for future challenges. Over time, these strategies help restore the brain's sensitivity to natural reward signals, making long-term goals feel attainable and effortful work more satisfying. Structuring goals into smaller, achievable milestones is a powerful way to harness the brain's dopamine system for sustained motivation and focus. The brain responds strongly to measurable progress, and when large objectives are broken down into manageable steps, each completed milestone triggers a dopamine release. This release reinforces the behavior that led to progress, creating a positive feedback loop in which effort and achievement continuously support one another. Without clear milestones, the brain may perceive a large goal as distant or unattainable, leading to reduced motivation and difficulty maintaining focus. The process of breaking goals into smaller units works because dopamine responds to anticipation and prediction. Each step toward a goal provides the brain with a signal that progress is occurring even before the final outcome is achieved. This anticipation of progress stimulates motivation and energizes behavior. The brain interprets each completed step as a signal that effort produces meaningful results, which strengthens attention, persistence, and engagement. By designing milestones thoughtfully, it becomes possible to maintain a continuous sense of forward momentum, even in tasks that require long-term commitment. Milestones also support the learning aspect of dopamine signaling. Every time a step is completed and recognized as progress, neural pathways associated with successful effort are reinforced. Over time, these circuits become more efficient, making it easier for the brain to initiate action and sustain focus on similar tasks in the future. This reinforcement explains why breaking complex objectives into smaller, clearly defined steps increases the likelihood of follow-through, even when the overall goal is challenging or time-consuming. In addition to motivating behavior, structured milestones improve cognitive focus. The brain's attention systems are optimized for processing manageable chunks of information and effort. When goals are too large or vague, attention may scatter, making it difficult to maintain sustained engagement. Milestones provide clear targets that the brain can focus on sequentially, which reduces mental fatigue and enhances the ability to concentrate. Each step becomes a concrete task, allowing attention networks to remain active and engaged. Another advantage of milestone-based planning is its effect on emotional regulation. Large goals can create anxiety or overwhelm if the brain perceives them as unattainable. By breaking objectives into smaller, achievable units, each step provides a sense of accomplishment, which supports dopamine-driven reward signaling and reduces stress. The brain experiences regular positive feedback, reinforcing feelings of competence and capability. This emotional reinforcement is critical because motivation is not purely cognitive. It is tightly coupled with emotional states that influence persistence and effort. Physical and mental energy are also better managed when progress is structured. Each milestone allows for intermittent reinforcement, making it easier for the nervous system to maintain high levels of motivation without overexertion or burnout. The anticipation of completing the next step provides a continuous stream of dopamine, which sustains drive and focus across longer periods. This approach is particularly effective for complex tasks or projects that might otherwise feel monotonous or overwhelming. Finally, integrating milestones with reflection enhances their effectiveness. After completing each step, pausing briefly to acknowledge progress and evaluate lessons learned reinforces the connection between effort and reward. The brain strengthens associations between purposeful action and positive outcomes, further enhancing motivation, focus, and the likelihood of achieving subsequent milestones. Over time, this system of structured progress reshapes behavior, making goal pursuit more consistent, engaging, and naturally satisfying. Physical activity, consistent sleep, and delayed rewards play a critical role in regulating dopamine, which in turn supports motivation, focus, and long-term satisfaction. Exercise is one of the most potent ways to influence the dopamine system because it not only triggers the release of dopamine, but also increases the sensitivity of dopamine receptors in the brain. This means that after engaging in regular movement, the brain becomes more responsive to natural sources of motivation and reward. Even brief periods of activity, such as a short walk or a series of bodyweight exercises, can enhance alertness, energy levels, and the ability to concentrate on cognitively demanding tasks. Exercise affects multiple systems simultaneously. Physical movement increases blood flow to the brain, supplying neurons with more oxygen and nutrients, which improves overall brain function. Dopamine released during exercise primes the brain to anticipate rewards from effort, making subsequent tasks feel more manageable and engaging. In addition, exercise produces a cascade of neurochemical changes, including the release of endorphins and other neuromodulators, which enhance mood and reduce stress. This combination creates a fertile environment for motivation, where the brain is both chemically and energetically prepared to pursue meaningful goals. Sleep is equally crucial for dopamine regulation. During sleep, the brain recalibrates many of its chemical systems, including the pathways that control dopamine production, release, and receptor sensitivity. Inadequate or irregular sleep reduces dopamine efficiency, which can manifest as reduced motivation, difficulty sustaining attention, and diminished capacity to experience satisfaction from effort. High-quality sleep restores these systems, allowing the brain to respond appropriately to progress and reward cues the following day. Moreover, sleep is when memory consolidation occurs, reinforcing learned behaviors and strengthening the neural circuits that connect effort to positive outcomes. Delayed rewards are another essential tool for managing dopamine. When the brain learns to associate effort with outcomes that are slightly postponed, it strengthens the anticipatory signaling that drives motivation. Immediate gratification can produce rapid dopamine spikes, but frequent exposure to instant rewards can desensitize the system, making sustained effort less rewarding. By intentionally delaying gratification after completing a task or reaching a milestone, the brain is trained to recognize that effort itself is valuable. Over time, this practice enhances persistence and reinforces the natural feedback loop between effort, progress, and satisfaction. The combination of physical activity, sleep, and delayed reward also affects focus. Balanced dopamine signaling improves the brain's ability to filter distractions, maintain attention on a single task, and resist impulsive behavior. Exercise primes attention networks, sleep restores cognitive capacity, and delayed rewards maintain engagement with tasks that require prolonged effort. Together, these strategies create a state in which motivation and focus are aligned, allowing the brain to sustain high levels of productivity while simultaneously experiencing a sense of satisfaction from meaningful progress. These approaches also interact synergistically. For example, physical activity can improve sleep quality, which in turn enhances dopamine regulation. Similarly, delaying rewards after exercise or focused work reinforces the connection between effort and positive outcomes, further strengthening motivational circuits. Over time, this combination stabilizes the dopamine system, making it more resilient to environmental distractions, instant gratification, and fluctuating energy levels. By strategically incorporating movement, adequate sleep, and thoughtful reward timing into daily routines, the brain's dopamine pathways are optimized to support sustained motivation, deep focus, and genuine satisfaction from consistent effort. Training the brain to associate effort with meaningful progress is one of the most effective ways to enhance motivation, focus, and long-term satisfaction. When the brain experiences repeated patterns where effort consistently leads to tangible results, dopamine signaling is optimized, reinforcing behaviors that support sustained engagement. This process transforms the perception of work itself, making effort inherently rewarding rather than merely a means to an external outcome. Over time, the nervous system becomes more efficient at maintaining motivation and attention, even during challenging or delayed tasks. The connection between effort and progress relies heavily on the brain's ability to track incremental achievements. Each time a step toward a goal is completed, dopamine is released, signaling that the action was worthwhile. This release reinforces the neural pathways associated with goal-directed behavior, making it easier for the brain to initiate similar actions in the future. By consistently experiencing these small victories, the brain learns to expect that effort will eventually produce meaningful outcomes. This expectation creates a positive feedback loop in which sustained effort becomes increasingly natural and satisfying. One of the key elements of this process is attention. When the brain focuses on actionable steps rather than distant or abstract goals, it is able to allocate cognitive resources efficiently. Maintaining attention on achievable targets ensures that each completed action is recognized by the nervous system as progress. This recognition strengthens motivation because the brain receives continuous feedback that effort is producing results. Conversely, when attention is scattered or unfocused, the connection between effort and reward weakens and motivation declines. Emotion also plays a significant role. When effort is consistently linked with progress, the brain experiences not only dopamine-related reward signaling, but also an increased sense of competence and self-efficacy. This emotional reinforcement supports resilience in the face of obstacles, making it easier to maintain focus and persist through challenges. The brain begins to interpret effortful action as both meaningful and manageable, reducing the likelihood of procrastination or avoidance. Structuring tasks in a way that emphasizes incremental progress is essential for strengthening this connection. Large, complex goals can feel overwhelming if the brain perceives them as distant or unattainable. Breaking goals into smaller, clearly defined steps ensures that each action produces measurable feedback. This structure allows the dopamine system to track progress continuously, maintaining motivation and focus throughout the process. Each milestone acts as a signal that effort is producing tangible results, reinforcing the habit of consistent work. Physical activity, reflection, and focused work sessions further enhance the link between effort and progress. Exercise primes the dopamine system, improving receptor sensitivity and energy for goal-directed behavior. Reflection allows the brain to acknowledge achievements, reinforcing neural connections associated with successful effort. Focused work sessions create an environment where sustained attention maximizes the impact of each action, making progress more visible and reinforcing. Delaying gratification slightly after completing effortful tasks strengthens this process even further. When the brain learns that reward reliably follows effort, it deepens the association between work and satisfaction. This reinforces the natural feedback loop in which effort produces meaningful outcomes, enhancing both motivation and the ability to maintain attention over extended periods. Over time, consistently linking effort with progress trains the brain to value persistence, making goal-directed behavior more automatic, engaging, and inherently rewarding. Over time, consistently linking effort with progress reshapes not only behavior, but also the brain's internal wiring. The neural circuits associated with motivation, focus, and reward become stronger and more efficient, allowing the brain to sustain energy, attention, and persistence with less conscious effort. As a result, challenges that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable, and long-term goals become attainable without relying on external pressure or fleeting bursts of willpower. By reinforcing the connection between effort and meaningful progress, the brain naturally cultivates a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, creating a cycle where motivation, focus, and achievement continually support one another, making growth and success both sustainable and deeply rewarding.